Hello, everyone. I see people are coming in. Welcome. So this is a webinar. So as people are logging in, I'm just going to kind of start giving some notes before we get started. So this is a webinar. If you're not familiar with Zoom webinars, you can see and hear us, but we cannot hear or see you through the webinar format. So we want you to be comfortable. Don't worry about can people hear me, see me? No, we cannot. The other part that I want you to know, if you're not familiar with Zoom chat or the functions, at the bottom you have hello. Thank you for the greetings. At the bottom of your screen, you have a couple of options. But we want to make sure that you know how you are communicating with us throughout this webinar. You'll see that there's a chat function. In that chat function, when you write something in the chat, everyone can see what you're writing, right? But if you have a question and you prefer for that question to be anonymous, we encourage you to use the Q&A function. So down at the bottom or somewhere on your screen, you should have kind of like a menu of options. There's an option that says Q&A. When you submit your Q&A, those questions, only the panelists can see them. So not everyone will be able to see your question. We want you to just start using the Q&A function as soon as possible. If you have a topic that you want to make sure we cover during this webinar, we already have a great session plan for you, and we know what are some of the most frequently asked questions our students have, but we don't want you to leave today with questions or that we don't want you to leave wondering with any things. So we're going to get started. I'm actually going to pause before we get started. I keep seeing this glare and I don't want you to see. I hope that you can see the presentation. Jen, can you see everything okay? Okay, good. Okay. So let's get started then. Again, start using the Q&A function. If you know that you have a specific question that you'd like to get answered today, we're going to do our best to answer all questions. But remember, we cannot see or hear you, so please use that Q&A function. So you are here today for a first generation session. These sessions are in two parts. So today is part one. Part one is what we're going to cover today is talk a little bit about the difference between a university and a community college, how the transfer track versus workforce track. We're going to talk a little bit about partnerships and partnerships to universities that you might have already heard about. And then we're going to cover some information about tuition, financial aid, and scholarships. What this session is, in talking about these things, is helping first generation students maybe get familiar with some of this lingo, some of this language, some of these options at a community college. We're not going to go into too much detail about one particular topic. We actually have a list of events that are either pre-recorded, or we have a list of upcoming spring events that will be specifically tailored to a certain topic that we would encourage you to attend. But many times as a first generation student, you jump into information and sometimes we just want there to be a pause of can we just take a step back and maybe just start with some of the general information that I should know about or I need to understand first. And that's what we're trying to create with this space while talking about these listed topics, right? So you'll see some random first gen notes along this presentation. First gen students, you're already making a difference by just being yourself. And what a wonderful journey it will be. It will be an interesting, it will be a hard journey, but we also just want to start establishing a space and for you to meet people that will help you along the way. So with that, I want to introduce myself. I haven't introduced myself. My name is Elizabeth. I'm one of the admission representatives. As an admission representative, our job, our goal is to help students through the enrollment process. But this may feel a little different than if you're a recent high school grad, maybe what you are thinking about what the high school environment is like, or if you're an adult student and you haven't been in school in a while, how does this community work? At the college level, you're going to meet people from different departments. So I am an admission representative, and with me is my colleague, Jennifer Stewart, who is a financial aid representative. And so together we'll be co-presenting and giving you some of this general information. In advance, you might hear my dog. I am at home, so I apologize. But hopefully you can hear me. Next slide. Who is a first generation student? I think sometimes first gen gets thrown around, and so sometimes we need to start from there. Who is a first generation student? And you have self-identified by attending this event. You are a first generation student if that's how you identify and how kind of you see yourself through this journey. But at College of DuPage, we define first generation as a student who their one or both of their parent or legal guardians did not attend a four-year university, college or university, right? Attempted some college but did not complete a bachelor's degree, attended if one or both of your parent or legal guardians maybe attended a community college, a technical school, or an institution in another country, maybe attended college, maybe your parent or legal guardians attended college, but you, the student, have lived away from them for more than half your life. And this last one is kind of not that it's an identifier, but we want to make sure that our adult students, 20 and older, right? If you're 20 years old or older, that you know that you are also considered a first generation if you meet any of the bullet points listed above. Sometimes our adult population, our adult students, think that some resources, certain information is only for what you would think of like your traditional age college student. And we want to make sure that you know that all of this information is also for you, our adult learners. So before this presentation, we looked at the registration. Before this event, we looked at the registration and we saw that most of you have already applied. Some of you haven't, but most of you have. And so we want to start just with your application and maybe what you submitted here. So this may look familiar, but when you start with the application, I'm so sorry. I'm going to take a minute and put this dog away. Give me 1 second.
Right. And again, as Elizabeth has stepped away, please feel free throughout the presentation. If questions come up along the way, feel free to put those questions in the Q&A like Elizabeth mentioned. That are only questions myself and Elizabeth can see, or you can definitely put questions in the chat and everybody can see. So you don't feel like you have to wait until the end of the presentation. Please submit those questions as they come up and we'll address them as the presentation's going on.
Thanks, Jen. Oh, the beauties of, you know, sometimes having these interruptions. Okay, so I'm going to jump in right where I was. This may look familiar. Some of you have already submitted your application. For those of you who haven't, it's okay. But we want to start at least the conversation where we're explaining a little bit of the difference between four-year university, community college, transfer track, and workforce track. Some of you know exactly what you want to do. Some of you are still deciding, and that's one of the many benefits of a community college. So when you submit your application, a couple of tips on the application. If you've already submitted your application, it's okay. If you listen to this information and you think, oh, I think I might have made a mistake, we can always help you in updating it. But the first tip is make sure you're submitting your own application. Sometimes, you know, parents want to help students and they want to help, but they end up doing the application for them. Or maybe your partner, your spouse, right, is going to try to help you and then they end up completing the application for you. And it's really important that students complete their own application. It's important to use full legal names. For example, my name is really long, and so it's very tempting to just kind of shorten it or use nicknames, but this is like a legal document. And so it's important for students to use their full legal name on an application. It's important to use your personal email. Try not to use either an email from another institution. So say if you're like a high school student, you still have access to your high school email, you shouldn't use your high school email account. Or sometimes our adult students, just because we're always working, they may use their work email. It's really important to use your personal. When you're applying and moving through the process, you will be communicated to the email you provide on the application. So it's really important that you have access to that email. In the application, there are 3 questions in regarding your career track. So the first question is an academic pathway. Think of this as like a general umbrella, the general area of study that you plan to pursue. So you'll see very general areas like business, education, health science. But then towards the bottom, you'll see that there's a general transfer or undecided option. You can select whatever kind of fits you best. The second bucket will kind of narrow down a little bit more and it starts asking you about your intended major. So for example, if I were to select social and behavioral sciences in the first box, in the intended major box, it's going to pull up the majors under social and behavioral science. So the social and behavioral science majors are areas like anthropology, human services, psychology, sociology. Again, you can select if you have a specific major in mind, you can select that option. And then we get to the degree and certificate box. This is really important for you to note that at a community college, some students are pursuing degrees or certificates, while other students might be attending COD just to take a class, right? They're not pursuing a specific degree or certificate. They may be taking a class for personal enrichment classes. And so therefore they're not seeking that degree. But in order to qualify or for your financial aid to be processed, you do need to be a degree or a certificate seeking student. And I'll let Jen talk more about that when we get to the portion about financial aid. So if you were to select undecided in the first box under pathway, you can be an undecided student, have an undecided major, right? Because you're not sure what you want to study, but your degree or certificate will automatically populate to an associate's degree that is general and transferable. Until you decide what you want to study, you can update it later with your academic counselor. So what does this mean and what are all these different options of degrees and certificates? So let's talk a little bit about that. So at a community college, we basically have two routes, if you would. Students are either working on a transfer option or workforce. Some students attend College of DuPage fully knowing that they're going to complete some coursework and go straight into the workforce. They're not necessarily planning to transfer. This is typically called an associate in applied science, as well as certificates. So in the associate of applied science, for me, the way I remember is applied. That's the key word, an associate of applied. You're applying your study in a very specific area. These typically have less general education coursework because there's more emphasis on that technical skill. So majors like automotive, culinary, fire science, welding, manufacturing, and there's tons of other options, right? And then there's a transfer option. The most common transferable degrees are the associate in arts, the associate in science, or the associate in engineering. So the difference between the associate in arts and associate in science is typically that the associate of arts requires less math, less science, and has more electives, where the associate of science requires more math and science and has a little bit less electives. So students can be undecided, but if you know that you're not going into a STEM related field, something with science, technology, or math, then you're probably going to be pursuing an associate of arts. Right? If you're not sure, if you're thinking, maybe I am going to pursue something in the science or a STEM related field, then we advise that you start following an associate of science so that we make sure that you obtain enough science or math credits. But this is a specific conversation that you will have when you meet with an academic counselor. These associate's degrees, again, they're heavy focused on general education coursework and common majors, right? Biology, chemistry, or pre-professional, pre-med, pre-dentistry, business majors, communication, education, psychology. And again, there's a long list, but these are just to name a few. Right? So when a student tells us, I'm at COD pursuing an associate degree, it kind of doesn't tell us much, right? There's different types of associate degrees. The degrees at community college are called associate degrees, but there's the associate of applied science, associate in arts, associate in science, associate in engineering. And then the certificates are based on program. So it's the culinary certificate or the automotive certificate. So there's different options. Some students feel, first-gen students sometimes feel that stress of, I feel like I have to have everything planned out in order to kind of start, or I feel unprepared for a conversation with a counselor. Again, we want to make sure that you know that we want you to know this information, but we don't expect you to be the expert. These are conversations that you will have along the way through the enrollment process and with an academic counselor. So some students, a frequently asked question is, I heard that there's some programs or partnerships with universities. Do I have to like commit to that before I start? Do I have to know that? The answer is no. You don't have to know exactly where you're transferring. You don't have to know if, you don't have to commit to a program when you start. The earlier you mention your interest or the earlier you make that decision, the better. But we can definitely help you start and at least your first semester of taking classes before you feel like you have to commit to something. So I just want to go over some of like the general programs that students ask about that they might have heard in passing or from a neighbor at a school or something. And these are different academic options. There's a lot more. So if you don't see something listed here, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, but these are just the most common that we kind of get asked about. Community college, at College of DuPage, we have lots of great partnerships, but they're called they're always called a little bit different. So it can get confusing as to how students are hearing about them or how they understand them. So first, let's talk about guaranteed admission. Guaranteed admission, we have guaranteed admission, for example, with UIC, the University of Illinois at Chicago, Northern, Elmhurst. We have a partnership with DePaul, but these partnerships are with multiple majors, not just with one, it's with the school. And so guaranteed admission means that students would have to sign on to these guaranteed admission before they hit a certain number of credit hours. Typically, it's before you hit about 30 credit hours, which is a year, right? And then you have to meet the requirements. You have to maintain the GPA that particular institution requires. But at the end of your time at COD, you are guaranteed admission into that school and most of the time into that particular department, right? So not just to the school, but to the major, which is a beautiful thing, right? Then we have 3+1 programs. 3+1 programs are with very specific universities for very specific majors. So it's only with a few universities and only for a few different majors. But the 3+1 programs are where it's 3 years at College of DuPage and 1 year at that partner university. Think of it kind of like a high school where your freshman and sophomore year is at College of DuPage. Your junior year is also at College of DuPage, but it's now for specific courses that 3+1 university requires. So they're letting you stay an extra year, your junior year, but you're still paying College of DuPage tuition, which is much more affordable than the 4-year. And then the +1 is like senior year, where now you are a student of one of those partner universities, you're taking their classes, but they have agreed to discount the tuition rate. For most of the programs, you are actually still on COD's campus for that +1. Roosevelt University is one university where you would have to go to the Schaumburg campus, but it's still part of that 3+1. So 3 years at COD, 1 year at that partner university. So there's a cost savings to this program, right? Engineering pathways. I'm sorry, my computer is very sensitive. Engineering pathways is a partnership that we have with the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and it's specifically for their School of Engineering. So for these programs, for this program, students typically have to apply during their senior year of high school. UIUC does have a second opportunity for students to apply. There's a very specific application process, but in the gist of it is that students apply to College of DuPage. They're pursuing their Associate of Engineering, but with very specific course sequence that UIUC has provided. If they maintain the GPA, then they are guaranteed admission into their School of Engineering. So you don't have to know, or you don't have to feel like you have to commit to these programs, but it's good to mention if you are interested. And it's also part of the college experience that once you become a student, you start exploring these options. There's tons of information sessions that will be available to you throughout your time at COD. So check your email for when those sessions become available. Another frequently asked question or concern for students is, how do I make sure my classes transfer? We do have some resources available online, but that's also part of the conversation with a counselor. They'll start guiding you through what transfer looks like. The degree within the courses within the Associate of Arts or Associate of Science are all transferable. But here's the thing, it's not just about does it transfer, it's also how does it transfer? Does it transfer is a yes or no question. Yes, my classes are going to transfer to another university. But sometimes the follow-up question, or sometimes even the more important question, is how? How are they going to transfer? Where are these classes going to count in my curriculum at my next institution? Some classes are going to count as electives. Some classes count as general education courses, or some of the courses that you can take at COD can kind of like knock two birds with one stone. They're counting as a gen ed, but they are also the prerequisite to your major or to that university. Right, but there's resources that will be available to you to make sure that you know that classes are transferring. Another frequently asked question is what's my schedule going to be like? I think it's really important for you to take a minute before the semester starts and think about what your strengths and weaknesses are and how that's going to impact your semester. Whether you're a high school student and you've been used to being in school Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., or whether you're an adult student working, Monday through Friday, and you're balancing work, your family responsibilities, and other things that are happening in your week, right? One thing that we want to mention before, as we get into this specific conversation about your schedule, is how are you planning for future semesters? So we want to get you through the enrollment process and get you started at COD, but what are some things that you should know even for future semesters? So for example, summer registration typically always begins in March. Fall registration typically always begins in April. And spring registration typically always begins in November. So for example, if you are starting this August and you have not yet registered for classes, that's okay. We don't have deadlines. But what I want you to know is that registration started in April, right? And so the longer students wait, that's when classes start getting filled up. So if you are in this session and you want to start in the fall in August and you have not registered for classes, I don't want you to stress out more than you probably already are. But what I do want is by the end of this presentation is to know what your next steps are going to be, right? So what's my schedule going to be like? This is a very important conversation for first gen students because sometimes our family wants to support us, but they just don't know how because it's like uncharted waters, right? What is this change going to be like? So this is just an example. This is an example of a student taking 4 classes. So you'll see the student is taking speech, math, English, and history. Every class is given a certain number of credit hours. You might hear someone say credits. You might hear other people say hours, but it's credit hours. It's the same thing. Credit hours typically means more so how many hours you're going to be in that class per week, right? So this student is taking 4 classes. If we add up the hours, 3, 6, 9, 12, taking 12 hours, 12 credit hours or more is considered full-time. Anything 11 hours or less is considered part-time. So college is a little bit like, it's kind of like a job, right? Are you going full-time or part-time? Students typically, another question, frequently asked question is, how do I make sure I finish in 2 years? I want to be done in 2 years. So if you want to be done in 2 years, your students typically take about 15 credit hours per semester to be on track to finish in 2 years. If you are an adult student and you're going to take it as however many classes you can take per semester, right? Our seasons change, right? One season I may be more busy than another. You can always flip-flop, right? You can take part-time one semester, full-time the next semester, and kind of adjust as needed. However, the number of credit hours that you take will also impact your financial aid or your scholarships or other areas. So again, I'll let Jen talk about that in a minute. So if you see speech is a 3 credit hour class, this student decided to register for a class that meets Tuesdays and Thursdays from 8 to 9:15, almost about an hour and a half, but an hour and a half on Tuesdays, an hour and a half on Thursdays equals 3 hours. But look at this history class. It's also a 3 credit hour class. This student decided to register on Monday evenings from 6:30 to almost to 9:20, almost, 9:30. So 3 hours straight. They're only attending history once a week, but it's for the 3 hours straight. And now they don't have to go back to history until next week. So at the college level, you are creating your own schedule, whatever day and time works best for you. right? The longer you wait in registration, now you're kind of creating the schedule based on whatever's left over. So if you want a very specific schedule, you know what would work ideally for you, it's really important that you're trying to register as early as possible. It's also important to note, kind of the general idea is that for every hour you're in class, you're going to have about 2 hours of homework. So when students or even like family look or whoever is supporting you, right? When you look at this schedule, it kind of looks like you got a lot of time, right? You have a lot of time. And students sometimes forget to plan homework or just other things that you have going on in your life. So I have a lot of students who might want to schedule all their classes in the morning. Say you are a recent high school student, you're working, but your priority is school. I have a lot of students say, I'm going to schedule all my classes in the morning so I can have the rest of the day off, right? And sometimes it's someone at home kind of recommending that. But this is your time to kind of, again, self-reflect and think, what's going to work best for me? I always give myself as the example, but I am not a morning person. I'm just not. I never was, and I never will be. If you make me take an 8 a.m. class, I'm going to be there because I am responsible. I'm going to be there every single day, but I'm not paying attention, right? And so there's a lot of students who they want to schedule their classes really early to be done, but then come midterms or finals, they're in a little bit of a panic mode because they realize they haven't taken really good notes, right? Or when I was in college, the place where I could do homework the least, like it was the worst place for me to sit down and do homework, was at home. I have a dog, right? Interruptions. My family comes home and they want me to do so many other things, right? Home was sometimes the biggest distractor. And so this is an example of how students schedule themselves to kind of build in homework time. So a lot of times parents might say, why did you give yourself this huge gap? Class ends at 9:15 and then your next class is at 1 o'clock. You're wasting your time. But if you know yourself that you're not going to do homework at home, this is ideal for you. You have no other option but to sit at our cafeteria, our library. There's so many open spaces and nooks that students can kind of sit and do homework. That might work best for you. For our adult students that are maybe working and you're building in, you're creating a schedule that's evening, are you giving yourself time to you maybe have dinner before, right? Are you packing a lunch? Are you giving yourself enough time, or where are you plugging in pockets of time for you to have access to your professor's office hours, or to come into our learning commons, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, which is like our tutoring center, right? So just kind of keep full-time, part-time, homework, work situation, your living situation, your living dynamic of how that's going to impact your schedule. This is an image that I always talk about. For first generation students, we often confuse laziness with so many other factors that are happening. Sometimes I hear students refer to themselves of like, I'm just such a procrastinator. I know I got so lazy. And the reality is you are not lazy, right? There's something else going on. A lot of first generation students, and I'm a first generation student, so I remember kind of facing some of these things, right? It's really fear. It's an unknown world. And so we procrastinated a little because it was something, it was scary to go into a new environment. Or we're really, we're perfectionism. We're perfectionists, right? We want everything to be right. And so we're not going to get started on something unless we know exactly what we're doing and how we're going to do it. So in this, as you're creating your schedule and going and navigating your first semester, I think it's important always to just identify what it is that's kind of happening, right? It's not laziness. It may be you don't know where to start and you need kind of just help organizing and kind of talking it out with someone. How do you get involved on campus? College of DuPage has so many great and wonderful opportunities to get involved. We have an extensive athletic program, an honors program. We have student ambassador program who students that give campus tours represent the college. We have an amazing study abroad office. We've won national awards for being one of the best community colleges in the nation to have study abroad partnerships. But and we also have Phi Theta Kappa PTK, which is an honor society at the 2-year college level. But we also have these really neat opportunities that are called learning communities. And I think this is a great option for first generation students. Sometimes starting at COD, it's a huge campus and students get worried about that, but our classroom size is average is like 25, 29 students, something like that. So it's a kind of a traditional classroom. You're not going to have these big lecture halls. So although our campus is big, please don't worry about the classroom being so big. But students also just wonder, how am I going to get connected? How am I going to build community? There's this thing called learning communities that you should look into every semester. They have a website, but this is where 2 or more professors kind of link up and co-teach their classes. So 2 or more classes are taught under like a certain theme. You're going to get credit for each class. It doesn't show up any differently on your transcript, but what's really nice, it's the same students in the same class, and the faculty have worked on how they're going to deliver this class. So meaning your homework or your tests are pretty aligned, right? So I'll give you, so just what you see on screen as an example. So just this past semester, there was a learning communities called Justice for All, social psychology in the courtroom. So this was a general education course of criminal justice and psychology. So you don't have to be a criminal justice major or a psychology major to take it. They can fulfill your credits in your degree. But it's a common theme on these 2 classes, right? So what you are learning in one, you're going to apply it in the other. It's really neat. And then the other one is Our Earth, Our Species, and Ourselves. So it's a biology class and a speech class. Again, general education courses at the honors level. So these are great opportunities to meet faculty, to build that relationship with faculty, to build community among students, and get connected to campus. The topics change every semester. So again, I would encourage you to look into learning communities every semester. You'll see that green circle at the bottom. Why do you think getting involved is important? I always remind students that college, academics is just one side of it, right? Academics is one side, but our goal is also to help you develop professionally and personally, right? If you're transferring, you're going to need maybe a letter of recommendation for a scholarship. You're going to need those experiences, and our goal is for you to transfer with those under your belt. If you are going and applying your coursework straight into the workforce, again, you're going to need references. And so it's going to be important for you to connect. It's only going to benefit you at the time when you're making a transition. Campus resources. This is also a really big one. Typically, if we were in person, I would ask for you to raise your hand and just kind of raise your hand if you asked for help within this last week. If you think about just the last 7 days, could you think of a time in your week where you asked for help on something, whether it was something at home, something at work? You said, I need help. Can you help me? And if we really think about it, most of the time, some of you may be really good at this, and so keep it up, but most of us could do a little better of asking for help. And as a first generation student, students definitely feel this when they start college, right? They don't realize how uncomfortable it is for them to ask for help. And it's something that we need to practice a little bit more. So we have tons of campus resources, and I think it's important for you to know about them because they're part of what you paid for with tuition, right? So our resources are not of extra cost. First, if you had an IEP or a 504, you still have access to support through our Access and Accommodation Office. You would have to request for your accommodations through their office, but please know that there are services here at College of DuPage for you. We have a Career Service Center where they help you. Oh my gosh, they do so much. They help you practice for interviews, writing your resume, your cover letters. They help you with researching an industry or the job market, right? Some of you may not know what you want to study, but you might have an idea, or you may have some interest and you just want to know, what's the job outlook for this particular industry? How many jobs are there right now in this area? What's the starting salary? So Career Services always provides a ton of information sessions. They're online. They'll do Zoom events, in-person events. So they try to reach kind of like all student populations, get connected with them. They also are very active on social media. Our Center for Student Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, there's always events and space for students to connect. I think it's really important for you to always check your email for those events that are coming up. Counseling, advising, and transfer services. Counseling and advising and transfer services. There are people that are going to help you pick out your classes, make sure that you are on track with your curriculum, but they also provide personal counseling. I think it's important for students to know that those resources are available. Sometimes, you know, the semester and life can kind of throw us for a loop, and it can get stressful and overwhelming. And so sometimes we just need the tools, someone to help us with some tools to navigate that season of our life. So know that those services are there. And then finally, the Learning Commons. So the Learning Commons is our tutoring center. Our Learning Commons provides assistance in pretty much all subject areas. There are, for some things you need an appointment, for others you can just be a walk-in. There's always kind of like some circle time for students. Maybe you don't really have a question, you just want to go in and sit in the Learning Commons and do your homework. I think it's important for students to connect earlier than later, right? Within your first semester, I want you to feel comfortable and kind of know what the resources of the Learning Commons that are available to you. So dear first gen, don't let your ego stop you from asking for support. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jennifer Stewart from our financial aid office. I'm going to always encourage you to follow financial aid, our financial aid office on social media. Jen, I'm going to stop sharing and you can start sharing your screen, and then she'll turn it over back to me and we'll close with some just reminders.
Okay, can you give me access to share?
Oh, you don't have access?
No.
Yes, 1 second. I'm going to start answering some questions in the Q&A. So please, if you have questions, comments from at least what I've presented so far, please go ahead and start entering your questions under the Q&A function. And Jen, I think you should be good to go.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the financial aid part. Like Elizabeth mentioned, more in a general setting, what type of financial aid is out there, how we kind of determine your financial aid, and then we're also going to talk about payment options, because not everybody attending College of DuPage is going to be using financial aid, so we'll touch on the payment options as well. Okay. So first, if you are interested in applying for any type of federal grants, state grants, federal work study, or federal direct loans, your first step is to file that FAFSA application. So that's your free application for federal student aid. You can complete it online at studentaid.gov, or you can download the My Student Aid mobile app. This is a federal application that's completed every academic year to determine what your financial need is for those various programs. So there's some students where they'll submit their FAFSA information. Based on their results, their financial need determines that they only qualify for federal direct loans. Some students may fill it out, and based on their FAFSA results, their financial need indicates that they're eligible for grants and federal direct loans together. We would look at what your results indicate, and then we would update your financial aid offer through your self-service to let you know what you're eligible for. And we get questions, you know, how is financial need determined, et cetera. When you submit the FAFSA, they calculate what's called your expected family contribution. So on your results, as soon as you submit the FAFSA online, your confirmation, you will get what your EFC number is. In essence, that's what the federal processor has determined that you as a family can put towards your schooling for the year. And that number is simply used as an index to see where you fall as far as financial needs. So it doesn't mean that's what you need to pay out. That doesn't mean that's what we're actually expecting you to pay out. It's simply an index number to determine your financial need. So if you are planning to attend in our fall semester, which begins in August, or if you're thinking spring semester that begins in January, or summer semester that usually begins at the end of May, you want to make sure that you're filing the 2022 2023 FAFSA application. And that information is going to be based off of your 2020 income information. So the income, the household size, that's really what's going to determine a student's financial need. Now, I do always make a note because, as we all know, 2020 is when everything with COVID hit. Businesses were closed, workers were furloughed. We do understand that there has been a lot of change with families' financial situation. So if you have had a change in your financial situation, whether you or your parent, after you submit your FAFSA, so for financial aid purposes, as far as that application goes, you're still going to report whatever is on your 2020 federal tax return. If there has since been a change of your income, maybe loss of benefits, lost your job, you were furloughed, you want to reach out to our office and inquire about what's called a professional judgment. We sometimes refer to it as a special condition. That would allow us to go into your FAFSA and manually change that income information so it more accurately reflects the income that's currently being used. Now, the special conditions, this has been going on for years and years. So it's not something new due to COVID. It's just due to COVID, we're seeing a larger request because of what the pandemic did as far as employment, businesses, et cetera. So we're just seeing a bigger increase, but this is something that has been around for a while. Okay. Now, to file the federal application, you do need to be either a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen. In the state of Illinois, for those students that fall outside of that, so that would be students that are undocumented, students that fall under DACA, those students that don't qualify for the federal application, the state of Illinois, through this RISE Act, has created an application to allow those students to apply for that state grant called the Illinois MAP grant. So students that file the FAFSA, you're automatically applying for that Illinois MAP grant plus all those other federal programs. Students that complete this alternative application for Illinois financial aid is only applying for that one Illinois MAP grant. So it's not being processed for any type of federal benefits as well. The Illinois MAP grant only covers fall and spring. So if you're planning to attend in the fall, again in August, or spring in January, you want to fill out the 22-23 alternative application for Illinois financial aid, and you can apply online at ISAC.org. Again, looking at 2020 income. Again, if there's been changes, you would let us know. Okay. Now, what exactly are you applying for? Because I've mentioned federal grants, state grants, direct loans. This is kind of break it down a little bit. So under gift aid, that's typically money that's awarded to students based on need. And typically that's money you do not pay back. So anything that ends in a grant, anything that ends in a scholarship, that's money you do not pay back. So the federal Pell Grant, the Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, which we often refer to as SEOG, that you automatically apply for by completing that FAFSA application. So that EFC number, again, that family contribution number, is going to determine your financial need in relation to those programs. In addition, you're also applying for the Illinois MAP grant, like I mentioned a little bit about with the alternative application and the FAFSA. Now, the state of Illinois does also have state programs available for our military. So if you are in the Illinois National Guard, or if you were an Illinois veteran, there are 2 grants that you can apply for directly through the state of Illinois to have funding for your tuition. Those grants would be handled through our veterans services here on campus. On top of that is scholarships. So filing the FAFSA does not automatically apply you for scholarships. However, some scholarships require the FAFSA to be filed because it helps to determine a student's financial need. Now, scholarships are not only looking at need. There's scholarships that are awarded to students because they have that high GPA, so those merit-based scholarships. Typically, those scholarships are looking at students who have a 3.5 or higher GPA for the merit-based. There are scholarships based on need. There are scholarships based on population. For example, first-generation students. There are scholarships that are specifically geared towards students in a specific population, first generation, returning adult, freshman, single parent. There's a lot of different scholarship opportunities out there, and that's another form of financial aid that you do not pay back. So on top of that, there's also financial aid that falls under what's called self-help. So that's where you're borrowing money or you're working in a job to earn money. So I mentioned federal loans. So at College of DuPage, we do participate in the federal direct loan program, and that can either be subsidized or unsubsidized. So when you file the FAFSA, you're automatically applying for the direct loans. The direct loans are in the student's name. There is no credit check. There is no cosigner. They're guaranteed educational loans. So what that means, again, is we're not looking at a credit check. We're not looking at a cosigner. You have to be enrolled in at least 6 credit hours to qualify and receive a federal direct loan. So what I like to tell students is when we update your offer letter through your financial aid self-service, which is in your My Access, you will see loans on your offer letter. However, that doesn't mean you need to accept them. Here at College of DuPage, the only programs that we automatically accept on your behalf are grants, because that's money you don't pay back. The loans on your offer letter, you will see that they are always set to pending, which means nothing's been accepted yet until you take that extra step and say, yes, I understand this is a loan. I understand this is money I'm going to pay back. I still want to continue with the loan program. So again, just because it shows up on your offer letter doesn't mean you've actually accepted anything until you take that extra step. Now, there are loans that parents can take out on behalf of their dependent student. And in these cases, the loan is in the parent's name. So the student has no legal responsibility to pay back that loan. And that's a loan the parent would take out on their behalf to help pay for their dependent student's college education. Again, filing the FAFSA to apply for those. Then there are private loans. Private loans are completely outside of FAFSA. So you do not need to file a FAFSA to apply for a private loan, but it's just what they say, it's a private loan. So the interest rate is going to vary, which means it's going to look at your credit. If you don't have the best credit or no credit, they may require a cosigner. So your interest rate is going to fluctuate, and you don't have all those protections as you have with the federal direct loans. So if you are looking at your offer letter and you have loans and you're thinking it's not enough, you might need more to go for the private loan, I would reach out to one of the financial aid representatives in our office and kind of talk through it and see if that's going to be the best route for you. The final one is federal work study. So federal work study is you work on campus in a student employment capacity. So any student, regardless of financial aid, can apply to work on campus as a student employee. So there is what's called college work study, where anybody can apply. Any student who's enrolled in at least 6 credit hours can apply to work on campus. You can work no more than 20 hours a week. Depending on the office, it might be less, it might be at that 20 hours. You earn a paycheck every 2 weeks, just like any other college employee. Your money for the paycheck comes from the college budget for that department. Then there's also federal work study. So it could be the same job. You're working the same number of hours. You get paid every 2 weeks, just like every college employee. However, the money for your paycheck is coming from this federal work study fund. So you as a student worker, you will never notice any difference between you and a college work study student if you're working in the same department. It's really behind the scenes where that federal work study is going to come into play. So if you apply for a position, say in the computer lab, we will look at your financial aid information and see if you're eligible for work study. If so, we will award it to you. And if you're hired for the job, then we'll pay you out through that federal work study. But I want to just make sure everybody knows that any student can apply to work on campus as student employment. And at the end of the presentation, I'll show you how to look up those jobs. Now, I did mention to file the FAFSA, you do have to be a US citizen or an eligible non-citizen. You also have to have a high school diploma or a GED. And you also have to be pursuing an eligible degree or certificate program. So as Elizabeth mentioned at the beginning, indicating what your program of study is, we need to see that you're pursuing something here at College of DuPage. So whether that's an associate's degree, whether that's an eligible certificate, we need to see that you're coming to College of DuPage more than just taking a couple classes to either transfer, or maybe you're taking a couple classes as a prerequisite for a job, etc. Financial aid is offered to students who are a degree-seeking student here at College of DuPage. And then you also have to maintain satisfactory academic progress. So as Elizabeth mentioned, there's lots of resources on campus through the Learning Commons, through counseling and advising. If you are struggling in your classes, just know that that may have an impact on your financial aid eligibility as well. So the federal government will continue to award grants if you're eligible, loans if you're eligible, but they also want to make sure that you're progressing academically. So from a financial aid point of view, we're going to make sure that you're maintaining a 2.0 GPA. We're going to make sure that you're completing at least 2/3 of the credit hours you attempt total. We're going to make sure that you're completing your degree within a timely manner. So as you're going through the financial aid process, we will keep you up to date as far as your standing goes. But as Elizabeth mentioned, if you're having any problems or issues with classes, or you think you might fail a class or drop a class, feel free to contact us and we can take a look and see if that is going to negatively impact your financial aid in the immediate future or long term. Now, I talked about how we're going to determine how your financial aid offer is determined. Everything starts with the cost of attendance. So each school you go to is going to have a set cost. That means we're going to look at what it costs for tuition. We're going to have an allowance for housing, transportation, books. Everything starts with a cost. We're going to subtract that EFC number, and the difference is your financial need. That's what we need to try to cover between those grants and the federal direct loans. So this is how you're going to be able to see that your award from school to school is always going to vary, because this figure here is always going to vary from school to school. Okay. So for those who like to look at things in a mathematical way, this is kind of a good flow chart. Once we know what your financial need is, we do what I call plug and chug. We look at what grants are out there you're eligible for, work study, any other need-based. Is there still need that we have to cover? If so, you're going to see the very last thing that we look at is loans. So when we're determining what we can offer you to cover that financial need, we're going to look at all that free money first. Then, if after all that's awarded, there's still any need, then we're going to look at student loans. But from a financial aid point of view, we want to make sure that we're giving you as much free money before we tie you down with any type of student loans. So just to give you an idea of what an award letter may look like, the award letter will always list out the type of award that you've been offered. So whether it's grants or loans, we're going to break it down by fall semester and spring semester, and then total amount. So we're going to lay everything out for you so that you know what you can expect each semester. The award letter will let you know the terms of the awards. For example, your Pell Grant is full-time. So if you're not a full-time student, then the actual amount dispersed will be prorated based on your attendance. But this will kind of give you an idea of what a general award letter would look like. Again, not everybody is going to qualify for these grants. This is based on need as determined by the FAFSA and for the Illinois MAP grant with that alternative application. Okay. Now I talked about scholarships. Like I mentioned, scholarships is not always based on merit. It's not always based on financial need. There's lots of different criteria when we look at scholarship applications. So to apply for scholarships, you would go to cod.academicworks.com. Now we are unique in that we offer scholarships each semester. Our fall scholarships are offered between January 15th and March 31st. So at this point, we've already awarded our scholarships for the fall semester. However, beginning September 1st through November 1st, we're going to open up our scholarship applications again for spring semester. So if you did miss that March 31st deadline, don't worry, we'll have more scholarships offered for the spring. And then if you're going to continue to be here fall of 2023, again, scholarships for fall will always be offered between January 15th and March 31st. So when you go to the Academic Works site, you're going to sign in. You will need to sign in with your MyAccess username and your MyAccess password. And then what it will do is it'll take you to a general application. So you're going to answer a couple questions about yourself. So what this Academic Works program is going to do is create a profile of who you are specifically as a student. Then it's going to match that profile against all the scholarships that we're offering here at College of DuPage, and we're going to match you up. So instead of you having to read through all the scholarships, see which ones you apply for, make sure you're hitting the correct keywords, we are going to do that search for you. So as you enter this general application and you click finish and submit, it will show you the scholarships that fit your specific profile. So if you indicate, yes, I am a first generation student, it'll go through scholarships that have that as the criteria and pass them forward to you. If you are interested in STEM, you indicate, yes, it's going to filter those specific scholarships out to you. So these are just a couple of the questions. We only copied a small part of the screen, but there's a lot more questions below. Are you a single parent? Are you dependent of a single parent? Are you first generation? You know, all of those questions. So you're going to answer it. And then if it says, here are the 15 scholarships you can apply for, then you just go through and apply for those scholarships. So we've really tried to streamline the application process and make it easier for students to locate scholarships that fit their specific profile, so it's easier for them to apply. Okay. Now, I mentioned about payment. So again, we understand that not every student at College of DuPage is going to apply for financial aid. There may be some students that are coming to COD just to take a couple classes to kind of refine tools for the workplace. We have students who, you know, maybe you're only going to qualify for loans, but you don't want to take out loans. The College of DuPage does offer payment plans. So this is what our breakdown is for fall. So right now it is June 15th. I always have to keep reminding myself what day it is. So if you are opting not to do financial aid, if you were to register for classes between now and June 30th, the day you register, you would pay 15% of your total tuition plus a $15 fee. Then over the next 5 months, you would make equal payments: July, August, September, October, November. So come November 18th, you have paid your tuition in full. So instead of you having to pay that whole lump sum at once, you can divide it over 5 months. Say you register, you know, July 7th. Well, now you're going to fall into the second category. You're going to make a little bit bigger of a down payment, 25% plus a $15 fee, but now you only have 4 months to pay it off. So the later you wait to register, the bigger the down payment and the less months that you'll have to pay that. So again, there's some students where they'll opt to do the payment plan, and that's completely fine. For those students who have financial aid, we have what's called anticipating financial aid. So depending on where you are in the financial aid process, what your financial aid awards are, you may qualify for this option, which means the day you register, you pay $5. So you're not doing a down payment, a percentage, you're doing $5. Your payment is not due until October 21st. The reason it is pushed out so far is we want to make sure that you have time for your financial aid to apply, because we won't apply any financial aid money until after your classes have started and we've confirmed your attendance. So by pushing it all the way out until October, it allows those financial aid funds to be applied to your tuition first without you having to come out of pocket to pay, because you're going to have financial aid coming through. So these financial aid, anticipating or incomplete, it's all going to be dependent upon what your status is the day you register for classes. So that's why it's really important. The earlier you start with financial aid, it's going to help when it comes to this payment plan option. Okay, so each semester there will be a payment plan option set out. Now, if you have not done your FAFSA, or maybe you're a transfer student and you had your financial aid set up at one college and now you're planning to transfer to College of DuPage, if you need help making that correction or even submitting either your FAFSA or alternative application, we do have virtual FAFSA completion sessions set up. It would be one-on-one, about 45 minutes. It would be via Zoom. So you would log in and then we would send you to a breakout room with a financial aid rep, where you would work one-on-one with that financial aid rep to submit your FAFSA application. So I'll show you on our website where you can sign up for those sessions, as well as finding out who your financial aid representative is. So I just want to take a minute and show you that information right now. So if you go to COD's website, let me move the control bar, under cost, scholarships, and aid, if you click on student financial assistance, This is where I was mentioning about that professional judgment or special circumstance that I was talking about. That's where you can find out more information and the form. If you have questions about your financial aid, if you click Contact Financial Aid, each of you are automatically assigned a financial aid representative based on your last name. So if your last name is P, R, V, or Y, I would be your financial aid representative. So if you had specific questions or if you wanted to go over your award letter, you could contact me directly. So you could either call me, or if you click on our name, it'll open up an email and you can send us an email. If your last name is J or M, then Jenny Madsen would be your financial aid rep. So even though we are a large institution, you do have a dedicated financial aid rep that's assigned to you. So please feel free to contact that financial aid rep. There's some students that I talk to every semester just so that they can stay in contact, make sure everything's going good with their financial aid, because we do understand financial aid is overwhelming for anybody, but especially for first generation students who don't have somebody that's going to help them through the financial aid process. We're still here for you. So you can either meet with us in person, you can meet with us via Zoom. We are extremely flexible when it comes to setting up financial aid appointments. If you click on workshops and events, that's where you'll be able to sign up for a virtual FAFSA completion session. So if you are interested, you could click on the link, it'll take you and you would select what day and time you want to meet with. You'll get an email confirmation with the Zoom link, and then you'll get a reminder email as we get closer to the session, just reminding you about your session and if you need to change anything. So again, we are still here to help you complete that financial aid application. And then one final site that I want to show you, as I talked about working on campus. If you go to cod.edu/HR, you're going to click on student employment. On the right-hand side, you'll click on campus student employment opportunities. Right now, we currently have all of our summer jobs posted. So there's about 18 positions posted. And July, around July 1st or so, is when we're going to post the jobs for fall semester. To apply for the position, you do need to be enrolled in at least 6 credit hours, and you have to have at least a 2.0. For summer, you have to be enrolled in at least 1 credit hour. So if you are interested in, say, the Courier, you can go ahead and click on the link. It'll tell you kind of what the responsibilities are. And if you're interested in applying, you can click Apply Now. Okay, so again, you can go through and see what types of jobs are out there. As you can see, this one is federal work study only, which means you'd have to have that federal work study eligibility to apply. So as you apply for jobs, we will go through the applications and make sure that you have eligibility. But again, student employment is open to anybody. So please, if you're interested in working on campus, I would highly recommend working on campus. Okay. And then final, and then I'll turn it back over to Elizabeth. If you have questions, you can give us a call at 630-942-2251. You can email us. Now, if you do email us asking questions about your financial aid status, we can only email back to your COD email address. So if you can get into the habit of using that COD email address, we'll be able to communicate with you, giving you specific information about your financial aid. Elizabeth mentioned following us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're constantly sharing information from federal student aid about watch out for financial aid scams, watch out for scholarship scams, understanding student loans, understanding your financial aid offer letter. So please follow us on social media to stay up to date on all things financial aid. So I will turn it over to Elizabeth. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen then.
Thanks, Jen. I'm sorry, I was trying to get the microphone unmuted. Okay, so I just want everybody to take a deep breath. We don't see you, but I can just imagine your faces, right? Like that was a lot of information. And this is why we want to create this space to start the conversation. We don't expect you to leave today's session being the expert. We want to just start talking about some of these things so that you know what to look out for. So here's what I want you to do. If you can either, if you're on a computer, maybe you're going to open a Word document. If you want to open an email like you're going to create an email. I'm about to send all the links we talked about today, right? So that you don't have to go dig for these links. So I'm about to hit send. It's going to be all the most important links we talked about. There you go. If you just want to click, copy all that, throw it into a Word document or into an email so that you have that handy. Those are all the kind of the main topics that we covered. We have just a couple of things left to cover. So I want to remind you, if you have questions as you're processing a lot of this information that we're talking about, please feel free to use the Q&A function. Don't put your questions in chat because they are not anonymous. If you put questions in the chat function, everybody can see your question. But if you use the Q&A function, then only Jen and I can see your questions, right? And we're going to address them. Jen, you mentioned a couple of things that I think are just really important to cover and kind of go over. There was a really good question in the chat that said, for work study, do students, does it like discount your tuition? And I thought that was an excellent question, right? And we want to make sure that students and families understand that tuition doesn't that work study does not automatically get applied to tuition. The funds are given to students, and students use those funds to however they need, right? So to cover their expenses.
Correct. So it's the one form of financial aid that we do not directly apply to tuition or book charges. So like Elizabeth said, it's a paycheck. We're hoping you use that paycheck towards, whatever educational expenses you have. But all the other programs, the grants, the loans, the scholarships, those are always applied directly to cover tuition charges, but not the work study.
Right. And then you mentioned, I'm so glad you mentioned that. That was a good reminder that in the admissions office, because it's typically very general information, we don't mind emailing students to their personal email, and we don't mind maybe answering a parent's email or a partner's email, right? I'm inquiring on behalf of kind of thing. But it's so important for students to know that at the college level, all communication is only sent to the student to protect your privacy and for your protection, right? And so this is also a good reminder. Again, I don't know who's on the other side of the screen. You may be the student, or you may be someone in a student's life that is supporting. Again, you're maybe a parent, a grandparent, an old sibling, your partner, right? Your significant other. We want to make sure you understand that we will always, and we're so glad that students have people supporting them, but it's really important to know that all departments at the college will only communicate to the student to their COD email. And so that's what they need to be asking. So let's kind of close up on some reminders. And then I also just want to show you some next steps. We had questions about placement testing and so forth. So I think a really important question for first generation students that sometimes students don't know what to ask. And so I kind of want to give you this question. When you are in a presentation or when you're learning about something as you're processing, sometimes it's okay to just ask, what am I not asking? What should I know that, I don't know what I don't know. And so I think sometimes that's a good starter to a conversation, right? What am I not asking? But we also just want to make sure that students just embrace their community college. Again, I want you to be really proud about your local community college and the community college option. Both Jen and I are products of a community college, and we both always talk about how much we love and appreciated our community college experience. So we want you to embrace the experience. We want you to explore different pathways and majors. This is a space where you have a room to explore, create a plan with an advisor, whether you're going into the workforce or transferring. It's so important to always kind of follow up on that plan. Has things changed? Am I still in line with that? And don't rush, right? I don't want to call it a mistake because it's definitely not a mistake, but sometimes students use the community college very transactionally, and that's okay, right? We want you to use the community college to whatever best fits you, but there are so many great opportunities and resources, and sometimes students don't embrace them. They don't look for them. So we have lots to offer. So I want to wrap up with a couple things. If you have additional questions, I want to show you who your rep is. What are your next steps and upcoming events? So I'm going to actually move away from here and go to our website. A couple of things. We covered a lot of information. So what's next? I put all these links are in the link that I sent, but on our website, cod.edu, there's always going to be this ribbon of information. Under admission, you should be following the steps to enrollment if you are a new student, right? Your first step is to submit your application, which I mentioned, I saw that most of you had already applied, but you need to make sure that you are setting up. Step number one consists of multiple steps, right? Submitting the application, setting up your My Access account, which is your student, like a student portal. You need to set this up so that you know your username and password in order to be able to log into your student email account, right? Where that's where we're going to communicate with you. If you are not checking your COD email, you're going to miss out. There's going to be important information that you just miss. Information about tuition and fees, financial aid, scholarships, right? I like new students using this page because it provides you the links directly to where you need to go. After you complete all items under step number one, you're ready to move into step number two, which is determine placement. There's the information in here, whether you already have previous college credit for if you're an adult student and you have some credit, whether you're coming right out of high school, right? There's a lot of similar information, but sure, things might be a little bit different if you have already have prior college credit, right? If you do not meet any of the items to be waived, then the placement testing links are right here, right? There are 2 tests, math and then reading and writing, right? So if you click on each link, it'll tell you how you can potentially be waived from math. If you click on the reading and writing, it'll give you what you need to be waived from reading and writing. You need to complete placement testing, either take placement testing or be waived in order to then be able to go on to step number 3, which is to meet with a counselor and advisor. Here's the phone number you would call, 630-942-2259. The first thing they're going to ask you for is your COD ID number. So I encourage you to always to have that handy. And they're going to confirm that you've completed placement testing. They're going to email you a link to a video just to kind of make sure they set the foundation. They want students to feel as prepared as possible for that conversation with the counselor. You'll watch that video, they'll give you an appointment. But this is a reminder that the counselor at the college level is not creating your schedule, right? They're going to talk to you about your academic plan, if you know your major. If you're completely undecided, I have no idea what I want to study, I have no idea if I want to go into the workforce, if I want to transfer, that's okay. I don't want you to stress on that more than you probably need to, right? That's the conversation that they're going to have with you. For students that are undecided, the question might not be, what are you looking to study? We might start with, do you know if you want to transfer or go into the workforce? Maybe that's where we need to start, right? That's the conversation that they'll have with you. They'll help you pick out your classes. Then with that list of classes that they'll give you, you can then register for classes. This means you're creating your schedule. You get to pick the day, the time, and the format. So no one's asked me this so far. I see there's a question in the chat, but I haven't looked at this. But the format at COD, we've always had online classes. So you will get to pick if you want in-person, hybrid, online, or virtual, asynchronous or synchronous classes, right? So you can kind of decide what best fits your schedule. When you register for classes, that means you're taking up a seat in a class. That's what generates a bill. So not just for this upcoming semester as a new student, but for every semester moving forward, you want to make sure that you know what your financial options are and that you have that in place so that when you register, it doesn't come as a surprise. Paying tuition should not be a surprise. You should have a plan. You already know either what your status is with financial aid, you know how to enroll in a payment plan, you have those things ready to go. And then finally, the last step is attend orientation. Orientation is not like at a four-year university. At orientation, it's not a date to register. You should have already met with a counselor and registered in step number 3 and 4. Orientation at COD is a good way to get connected and learn about all the other resources on campus. Right now, as you're getting started, we're talking about just transactional steps, right? What do I have to do? What are my next steps? But there's just so much to learn about COD, and orientation is a great way to meet different people from different departments and engage with campus community, right? So those are the enrollment steps. If you have follow-up questions after this presentation, all students have an admission representative that they are assigned to. So if you click on admissions, contact admissions and outreach. Here is a list of all admission representatives. So our adult team is Jeff Walker, Angela Nakovic, and Debbie Jaffe by Alpha. So Jeff is the admission rep for A through E. Angela is F through N, and Debbie Jaffe is O through Z. If you are a recent high school grad, or if you're still in high school and maybe just looking to take some college level credits, then we go by high school. If you are an out of district high school student, your admission rep is Rio. Bennett Academy, your admission rep is Stephanie. Fenton High School, I'm your admission rep. So you would look for the high school in order, right? You please don't feel like you have to leave here being the expert, and that you might have more questions tomorrow morning, right? And then finally, under admissions, you might have gotten the link, the direct link to this First Gen event, but there's so much going on. Under admission, visit COD, we have just so many options, and we want to make sure that you are getting all the information you need in order to, again, feel better prepared for those conversations. So we have them by category, but I welcome you just to kind of browse what's available, right? We have virtual walk-in sessions, adult information sessions, enrollment days for high school students. We have upcoming high school information sessions. We have an immigrant student workshop coming up, and then we have an extended list of recorded events. I host Spanish information sessions. There's campus tours, but I want to take you to the First Gen series. Remember that I mentioned this is part 1. Part 2 will be later on in the summer. And this is when we're going to get a little bit more into detail about things, preparing for placement testing, understanding payment plans and financial aid award letters, preparing for that conversation with a counselor. However, I do not want you to wait for the until this date to move forward, right? So if you are at the point of taking placement testing, you should take placement testing as soon as possible. Don't necessarily wait for this session. It may be still a good idea to attend and just kind of get this information, but please don't hold off on the process until July 13th. Please, we encourage you to move forward as soon as possible. Jen, is there anything that maybe I'm missing or?
No, I think you covered everything at this point.
So there was a question in the chat that said, can I set up an appointment to meet with my counselor even if I haven't done placement testing? Our counseling and advising will not give students an appointment if they haven't not at least have met the reading and writing categories, the reading and writing placement, whether you've been waived or you have taken the placement testing. They will give you an appointment even if you don't have the math done. Some of you are pursuing certificates that don't require math placement testing, so you technically don't need to do it. But especially if you are transferring to another institution, chances are you're going to need the math placement test. So that's actually a good question for this First Gen session. This is me talking to you as a fellow First Gen student, maybe not so much as an admission rep, right? We know that just even like a summer or a semester without math, it's gone. Like, I don't remember anything. And so my recommendation, my personal recommendation, and yes, my professional opinion is that students don't delay on taking the math placement test. And I know most of us don't like math, and so math sometimes gets a bad rep, but our placement test for math, if you read through the information, test 1 is practice, right? So the first test, you do it at home, it's free, it's untimed, you take it seriously because it's going to create an individualized study plan. You can practice in it as much as you want. When you're ready, then you have to visit one of our 6 testing locations to take test 2, and test 2 is the official test. That's the one that's scored. So I would encourage you just to review the steps to enrollment, kind of determine where you are in that process, and please ask any questions that you may have. Good. I don't see any other questions. Thank you so much for making time to join us. There is a version of this presentation already recorded and posted, but the groups are different and questions are different. So I think it's always nice to attend these sessions live. But in case you need to refresh or just revisit this conversation, please visit our website. Thank you, everyone. We wish you the best of luck. We want you to know that you should not walk through this college journey alone. We are here to help you and support you. And again, as a fellow first gen, I am so proud of you, and I hope I can meet you at some point in the future in person.